We are just so pleased to have Bill Rasmussen, who is the creator and founder of ESPN. Bill, thank you so much for taking some time to spend with us.
Thank you, Derek. Looking forward to it.
Well, the first question I've got for you is, when you created and launched ESPN, what was your vision at the time, and how close is that vision to what we see today?
What we set out to do was, I had this feeling that people were really interested in sports because I was. If I'm interested in it, everybody must be, right? But it turns out that was the case. But we had enough evidence that people were interested in sports, and we thought sports 24 hours a day addresses a lot of the problems that I thought, at least, the networks were missing. Basically, in the 1970s, television was New York-centric. They had the news go on at 11 o'clock because they figured everybody would go to bed. Those that stayed up late could watch the late show, but still at 1 o'clock in the morning, we signed off. I was working at a local NBC station, and come 1 o'clock in the morning, we'd say, "You've been watching, thank you very much, and here's the national anthem," and so on. But there are a lot of people who work different shifts. They work from 11 to 7. Some people work overnight. Some people work from the middle of the afternoon, and they missed all of the things like movies and news and the good things that people would enjoy, and sports. And in the late 1970s, the three big networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, only did about 25 football games a year. Can you imagine life with only 25 football games televised in a year? And we said, well, we're going to do them all the time. We can just do more football than anybody. As an aside, I raised that question a year ago when I was up at ESPN for one of their anniversaries, and reminded them when we started that's what the networks were doing. And George Bodenheimer, the president, looked over and nodded at somebody because he knew I was going to say, I have no idea how many you're doing today. That particular year, 2010, they were doing 417 on ESPN alone, college football games. But we started off to be a sports source no matter what time of the day anybody wanted to tune in, whether it was a game or news, sports scores, whatever it might be. And the idea being that if you came home at 3 in the morning and if you'd just been out with your neighbors for dinner at 7:30 and you didn't want to watch whatever the networks were offering, you could come and find some sports. And so SportsCenter, of course, filled a great need. And today SportsCenter is the most repeated. There have been more editions of SportsCenter than any other show in the history of television. So people must like the idea. And from then to now, I don't think it's changed really very much at all. What has changed is the technology to deliver the same message that we came up with then, and that is sports, sports, and more sports.
Well, I tell you, it's interesting. It's one of those early questions that I remember reading that you got was, well, who's going to watch sports 24/7?
Right.
And and I think you just answered it sort of brilliantly from the perspective of
it's just amazing. When 24/7, then that's 8,760 hours a year. That's a lot of sports. Especially when the big three networks combined were only doing like 1,300 hours back in those days. But then when the talk came up of a second ESPN, now that's way too much saturation. Now seriously, nobody's going to watch. How many people are going to watch? Well, today ESPN alone, not counting all of the other people that do sports, ESPN has 52 networks around the world, 24/7. People must like sports.
Well, so take me back to the late 70s and with the media landscape the way that it was in the late 70s. What made you think that there was no 24/7 network at all?
That's right.
Not sports. There was no 24/7 network. What made you think that this could be successful? And then also with respect to competing against the sports network behemoths.
Well, the big guys basically dominated television for 28 years. Television sets in those days, and it's hard for a lot of folks to believe today, or remember today, only had 12 channels. That's all you could get. There was no set-top box that could bring magically other things from around the world. And because of the FCC regulations of the day, many of those 12 channels were occupied by the big three networks, because if any of their signal touched a franchise area, the franchise had to carry it. So it was not uncommon to see 2 ABCs, 3 NBCs, and 2 CBS stations or something. You could just go up and down the dial. So that only left 5 channels for everybody else. And basically cable television in that era was really nothing more than signal enhancement to take a signal that they could get at at a tower someplace and send it off to people that couldn't get a good picture of the three major networks. Fortunately for us, the powers that be at the major networks decided that this was it. They had conquered the world and nothing was ever going to change. Their dominance was there and it was going to be that way forever. Well, as you and I know, Derek, nothing's forever. Things change. And we challenged them. They thought we were crazy. They all said it wouldn't work. Who's going to watch? All the things that you just mentioned. And suddenly we found, and we were tapping into what I felt then, and obviously has been confirmed over the years, the biggest demographic swath you can imagine. It's not men 25 to 34. It's not women of a certain age or kids. Our demographic was sports fans. And ESPN to this day, on the back of their card, their mission statement is to serve the fan. And so we had a demographic area that doesn't make any difference, north, south, east, west, young, old, male, female, rich, poor, whatever. We were going to go after that. And if you think about it, that is about the biggest demographic you can find, other than being an American, for example. We're all Americans, okay, but probably 90-some% of us also have a team we root for, and that's the market that we went after.
Well, you were talking about the big three networks back in the 70s. Why is it that we could not find ESPN in the TV guide in the early days?
Well, because of the development of the network industry, the big three basically controlled TV Guide and Nielsen. We couldn't get Nielsen to rate programs either. They would not go out and audit, for viewership until well into the 80s. TV Guide decided, we kept after them, and they said, well, and this was a vice president, so he obviously was well up the chain, and he said, we won't list you because real networks only have 3 letters. How's that for a kind of a jaded view of the world? In other words, the people that are paying our bills are the only ones that count, and they all have 3 letters. When they finally did list us, they in fact listed us as ESN. They made us a 3-letter network for a short while, but of course that turned into ESPN eventually.
They finally woke up and
Exactly.
smelled the coffee. Now, ESPN was not your first entrepreneurial venture and has not been your last. What is it that you believe that it takes to give an entrepreneurial opportunity the best opportunity to succeed?
First of all, being in our country is great. We don't have to go and ask permission to start to develop a new idea. My first one was back in 1959, and it just, if you're curious and you ask enough questions, you'll say, wow, nobody's doing that. How about let's try this? The problem with let's try this is sometimes it doesn't work. Most times it doesn't work. But if an entrepreneur, someone wants to be an entrepreneur and they're not curious and not passionate about what they want to do, they're not going to succeed. And so I've been curious my entire life and asking questions, and why doesn't this work, and how does that work, and why can't we do this? And the first company was that, an advertising service company. Build a better mousetrap, as they say. And passion. You and I talked about it. If an entrepreneur says, gee, I've got an idea. I think it's going to work. I think I'll go ask someone. I'm going to go see Derek and see if he'd like to invest in my idea. And Derek, well, I think this might work. You're probably not going to be too enthused. But if I come to you and say, Derek, this is just this idea, I can't tell you how it's going to explode upon the landscape. You might say I'm a little overreacting a little bit, but you'll also see I'm pretty passionate about it. So you might say, I think we're going to take a ride with this one and let's see what happens. And all of a sudden we have a success. And I think the culture in which we live lets that happen. It's just it fertilizes good ideas. Come up with an idea, go try it. You don't have to know everything there is to know about that topic. You don't have to know any of the facts, really. You can find somebody who knows. I don't know how television pictures fly through the air, but I've been fairly successful in television, so I don't have to know all that technical stuff. And you just have to have the vision and the passion.
Well, this theme of passion, I continue to hear from you. And speaking of passion, so ESPN is now seen essentially all over the world.
Indeed.
So when you look 30 plus years after you created this baby, how does it feel to you personally to have created something that is consumed around the world and is part of people's daily lives?
That's an interesting question, and it had never been asked until just recently, and I really don't think about it. I mean, obviously I'm proud of it, and it's been kind of like watching your kids grow up to be successful lawyers, doctors, pollsters, and in the case of one of my sons. But it's amazing, and I everywhere you go, I see it. You see it in the hotels, you see it in the restaurants, you see it everywhere, and people get all excited, and they're talking about ESPN, and I just sit and have my hamburger and don't say anything. And sometimes I think about, gee, they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. But I'm not overwhelmed. It's kind of incredulous when you think about it. But I haven't been there every step of the way. It was an idea. It's, be kind of like asking Edison when you walked into a place with a lot of light bulbs, what do you think when you look around here and you're the guy that invented the light bulb? I don't know what he would say. And so I don't really know what to say. But I am proud of it.
That's great. I was watching ESPN last week, as a matter of fact, as I do every day, and there was a press conference with Peyton Manning, and this was to announce that he was no longer going to be part of the Indianapolis Colts organization.
Right.
And a reporter asked him, "Why are you still going to continue to play? Do you feel that you have something to prove?" And Peyton's response was something to the effect of, "Well, I still like to play, and no, I don't have anything to prove." So you're still an entrepreneur. You're still involved in new ventures. Why don't you just retire?
Well, I tried it once, and retirement's not much fun. I did try it, and I played golf every day for 21 days and was bored silly, and within a month had another company going. I think if you stop exercising your brain and you stop doing what you've been doing along life's road, you're probably going to, I don't know whether you'll just die instantly, but I'm just curious. I suspect I'm going to be curious about things until I do die. I'm fascinated, and I love to see young, enthusiastic men and women getting involved in whatever it is. One of the things that I enjoy is speaking to groups like here at the Wharton School, meeting the young men and women and their enthusiasm. That's inspiring to me. So I guess I'll just keep on doing it. I can't really tell you why.
Well, I've taken you forward, now I'm going to take you back to early days in high school. Were you passionate about sports as a youth, and what led to your passion?
Long before high school, even in grade school, I was passionate about sports, and I was so pleased. I could, as I mentioned earlier, I could really run. For some reason, I was fast. Don't look so fast these days, but I was those days. And when the 8th grade team asked me as a 5th grader to play left field because I could run and I had an aptitude for baseball and softball in those days, I was really excited about that. And I used to follow the White Sox and the Cubs. My grandfather saw every game of the 1906 Chicago World Series, White Sox and Cubs, the only time they've ever played. And he indoctrinated me early on about baseball. And I saw Bob Feller pitch on opening day in 1940, and those were exciting things. So I was into sports early in grade school, and by the time I got to high school, it had become long since a passion. I could tell you about major league rosters and why the Cubs were hated than the White Sox, because I lived on the south side of Chicago, where the team of choice. By the time I was in the 3rd and 4th grade, I was reciting statistics and so on. And Luke Appling batted .388 in 1936 and won the title. You probably didn't realize that, batting title in the American League. But things like that, they stick. I don't know why. But in high school, I got to play baseball and just really, really enjoyed it. And then we played summer leagues and fall leagues, and any time that we weren't in school, we were playing, and right through American Legion and everything. And even then, though, I think people that were involved in sports were very, very active, alive, and they all went on to do great things. And great things, not necessarily like ESPN, that even still boggles my mind, as you know, but I think sports spawns competitiveness and makes people want to do things a little bit better. And in some cases a lot better, and they make it all the way to the major leagues.
Well, so we're talking about where you started with your passion in sports as a player, as a participant,
Mm-hmm.
and between that time and when you founded ESPN, you were involved in sports from a business perspective. How is it that you became involved in the business of sports, and how did that lead ultimately to?
As I wanted to play baseball, and I had an opportunity at the end of high school, but it was the very day we graduated from high school, North Koreans went across the 37th parallel and created a situation where anybody with a college deferment ought to take their college deferment, or they would be going into the Army. I wanted to play baseball, went to college, played some more, went to the Air Force when I got out, played some more, and by the time I got out of the Air Force, age starts to catch up with you, and the fact that curveballs are tough enough to hit when you're young became a factor. So I said, well, I want to be a broadcaster. I couldn't do that instantly because in the middle 1950s, radio and television weren't very much. I mean, it was each team had their own radio station. New York had 3 stations, one each with the Giants, Yankees, and Brooklyn Dodgers. So there was no opportunity there. So I said, well, we'll do something. I'm going to do something in sports before this life passes me by. And on my 30th birthday, I retired from the first company. Retired's a bad word. I just left the first company by agreement with enough money to pursue a broadcasting career. And that was one of my first brash steps in the broadcasting business. I looked in Broadcasting Magazine. They had these little basically classified ads. Station needs sportscaster called such and such, or newscaster, whatever it was. And I found one nearby in Westerly, Rhode Island, and the guy said, sure, come on up. He was looking for a sports director for a new station. So I went up, and he said, well, tell me what station you've been at. I said, I haven't. He said, well, what about your background in radio? I said, I have none. And he said, and what makes you think you can be a sportscaster, and why should I hire you? And I said, because I can, and I'll be a really, really good one for you. And he said, you know what, I'm going to hire you. So you have to go ask the question. So he asked, and I started in radio, and that led within about 15 or 18 months to television, and on. One thing led to another, and we did radio networks and a lot of TV broadcasting, and then hockey broadcasting. And each step along the way, I was doing independent little networks, trying to figure out how it worked. And I didn't realize that this wasn't what everybody did, It just seemed that it had to be done. So I went and did it.
So it's interesting. So, these days, there's not a lot of mixing between, on-air personality and suits, right? The executives, sort of behind the business.
Exactly.
But you made a transition, and not a small transition, from on camera or on air to, again, as we know, founding a pretty sizable and successful business. What's the secret to being able to make that type of a transition?
That's a good question. It just seemed very natural to me. But people ask that question like, why'd you do that? Or I don't know how I did it. I was a broadcaster, and I wanted to get a network put together that would get the message out to more people than I could do at a local station. Well, best way to do it is to go hook up some more stations. So I had to figure out how you do that. And that became kind of a background. And so by the time I was fired from my job at the Whalers to start ESPN, I knew about phone lines and local connections and AT&T and all that. And at the same time, RCA Americom had developed and launched the first communications satellite. Not very many people knew about it, and we just almost fell into the idea that we could do something across all of North America with one signal to one point and not have to go through all this television long lines business with AT&T. And back in the 60s, when I was starting radio and broadcasting and putting networks together, that I had learned all that stuff about AT&T. So here was something else to learn. What about the satellite business? I didn't even know you called them transponders when we started talking about it, but it doesn't make any difference as long as you know what it is. That just, it sounds like you're going to be embarrassed talking about something you don't know anything about, but you have to ask the questions. And when you're passionate and they're telling you, Yeah, you can do this. Okay, we'll do it. Oh, by the way, it's going to cost a little money. Well, we'll figure that out later. So that's just the way it's been all my life. And I guess I should start to slow down, but I don't know. It's too much fun.
Yeah, don't do that, please. So going back to your passions, what is your favorite sport and why?
Baseball, only because I've played it forever. And ESPN has a great show, Baseball Tonight, and Peter Gammons, who I've known for 40 years, I just think he does a great job. And has for 40 years, first in the newspaper in the Boston area and on ESPN.
Now, let's talk about mentors. Have you had any real mentors in your career, and is there any particular advice that they've been able to give to help you, if so?
I think back in my undergraduate days, there were a couple of professors who were unique and stand out, and oddly enough, one of them was an American history professor. And it was his passion for the Civil War, believe it or not, that led him once a year to hold a 2-night class, for want of a better word, where he would do the Battle of Gettysburg on 2 huge relief tables, basically, everything in proper relief and to scale. And these tables were like, 14, 15 feet long, and he would walk around, and his white hair would be flowing, and you could see his passion just oozed everywhere, and he knew everything there was to know about it. And they were turning kids away. He had to do it for 2 nights because everybody wanted to hear him. And this is a history professor. And I had him in class, and he was absolutely inspiring. And the other one was a financial organization and investment economics professor. How's that for an inspiration? And he had the same kind of passion. And in those days, we didn't have computers and laptops and all of those things. We didn't have, whiteboards and grease pencils and so on. We had old-fashioned blackboards and chalk. And he'd start by the windows on the blackboard, and he'd be going along, and he'd ask questions over his shoulder. And if he didn't hear an answer from someone that he had asked, he'd say, Derek, what about, and he's writing and talking, and if you didn't turn around, and he was left-handed, he'd turn around, he'd fire one of those erasers, those felt erasers. He'd hit kids in the shoulder and in the forehead and so on. Pay attention, pay attention. So, wow, if this guy is this passionate about numbers and economics, then there must be something to this business. And so those 2 guys, I don't know if you call them mentors, but they were sure 2 professors who made monstrous impressions.
Well, they clearly made an impression on you, and the passion is what certainly comes through and translates. What's your advice for young people who may be considering a career either in sports broadcasting or more generally in the business of sports?
First of all, they have to, obviously, sports has to be a passion, or they wouldn't even be thinking about that. Whether it's just they're curious about being a television producer or announcer or a lawyer at one of the major networks or whatever it might be. But I think what they have to do is understand, and the best way to understand how sports begins is it doesn't hurt to start small. Go and be a production assistant someplace. Go to a small radio station. Learn all you can learn. Ask all the questions you can ask. And when somebody's kind of, brushing you off and saying, "Yeah, don't bother me, kid," just say, "Well, I don't mean to bother you. I really want to know. I have a passion to learn this business, and I want to be, doing what you're doing, or I want to do fill in the blank, whatever they might want to do." And carry that passion into every interview and be prepared. If you're going to ESPN, you don't want to talk about things that the cooking channel has been doing, and I'm not putting down the cooking channel. If you're going to the cooking channel, you don't want to be a sports fan. You better know what you're talking about there. But I've just always believed that paying attention, learn as much as you can beforehand. But all the facts are not necessary. You'll learn the facts. You'll learn the specifics of the business. But whoever it is that you're applying to has to see the passion, see the desire to be successful. And I'm fortunate in that I see a lot of those. You just know they're going to be successful kids, folks here at Wharton and schools across the country. And then you see others who, they don't even want to walk across the street unless it's required. And And I don't mean to be putting anybody down, but the people with the passion, the people who ask the questions, the people who are willing and anxious, I guess would be a better word, anxious to learn all there is, they're the ones who are going to succeed. And it's amazing. You can pick almost any field, and if the youngster has that passion, they can learn anything. It doesn't have to be sports. It can be Wall Street. It can be the cooking channel. It can be anything. Passion, enthusiasm, and never be afraid to ask questions.
Well, that is a great note for us to finish up on. On behalf of the Wharton School and the Wharton Sports Business Initiative, thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Derek. Enjoyed it very much.